What's up, nerds? Today we got a bit of a doozy because Congress just passed a bill to either force the sale of TikTok from ByteDance or to outright ban TikTok from the App Store. And so we need to talk about this bill. We need to talk about what's at stake because there are a lot of national security implications here, and it's actually way more complicated than you might be thinking. It's not as straightforward as it might seem. Now, first, I want to at least admit my own bias here because I do have biases. I'm not necessarily a fan of TikTok. I understand that there's some benefits here in just a moment, but honestly, I think it's very cringe, and the things that people are willing to do to get famous on TikTok is terrible, and it's terrible for your attention span. I know that for myself, I've fallen down the Instagram Reels rabbit hole, and boy, I mean, that has shaken me up. I will spend so much time just scrolling on Reels, but at the same time, I notice that it's harder to sit through longer things. I just watched Dune, and it was a great movie, but it's a long movie compared to an Instagram reel. So I noticed that these are things that I'm not a fan of, but also, my background's in cybersecurity. This channel's on national security and defense. So I'm pretty aware of the threats that TikTok poses here, and I want to talk about that, and we will. I've seen how TikTok can basically suppress a different creator that doesn't necessarily forward a message that maybe the owners of TikTok would like. For instance, some of you might follow Preston Stewart. I follow Preston Stewart, and he's talked on Twitter a lot about how he's had issues on TikTok, trying to, basically just talk about the same kinds of issues that we're talking about in global security. And he's having his account basically reported or banned, and the TikTok help desk isn't really helping him along with this issue. So there are legitimate issues here, but I also understand why people like TikTok. It's a good entertainment platform. I mean, it knows how to entertain the user, incredibly well. And it also is great for people wanting to grow an audience. And this is where there's some kind of personal irony or hypocrisy here, because I have an account on TikTok. I limit the ways that I access TikTok. I don't keep it on my phone, but I still post to TikTok. I post chunks of these videos. I haven't in a minute, but I have in the past posted parts of these videos to TikTok to kind of, take advantage of its algorithm and to test, if it really will suppress your account. But those are my biases, but there are also facts. And the facts are that it does pose a national security challenge. That is, in fact, very real. Before we dive into the algorithm itself, we need to talk about the corporate structure, because that plays a huge role not only in this bill, but also in how TikTok can pose a national security threat. You might know that TikTok, it is itself its own company, but it's owned by a company called ByteDance, which is based out of China. Chinese law forces Chinese companies to share data with the government when requested. So basically, the Chinese government says to ByteDance, we want to take a look at the data that you are storing on your users. ByteDance has no choice. They have to say yes. They have to provide that data. Now, TikTok claims that the US data, like the data on US users, is stored in the United States, and it is not shared with ByteDance or with any of its services in China. Now, there is concern that this is not entirely true and that the Chinese government can still access U.S. user data from China. Furthermore, the ByteDance board has a Chinese government official on the board, and the Chinese government has a 1% stake in TikTok. Now, the 1% stake may not sound like much, but the board member certainly does. And their role in the board is to make sure that the ByteDance company is still following the political direction that the Chinese government wants the company to take. That's not made up. That is what it is. Now, beyond the corporate structure, which is itself a whole lot to think about here, there is also concern that the Chinese government can push certain narratives to users on the platform. Because it has control of the algorithm and the ecosystem, it can forward these narratives way easier than other platforms and way easier than, users that are trying to combat misinformation and disinformation can actually stop it. And these concerns are not unfounded. I mean, since this bill has been introduced into Congress and since this discussion has reemerged and really gained a lot of traction, we've seen the proof of this actually happen, ironically, in trying to prevent the ban from happening. We've seen how TikTok has pushed notifications to its users telling them, hey, TikTok is at risk of being banned, call your congressman. And these users have, in fact, been calling their Congress people, trying to pressure them to not vote for the TikTok ban. And ironically, that's had the inverse effect because this vote went through I mean, almost unanimously, it was a complete landslide, and we rarely see those kinds of things happen in Congress, especially these days. Now, the reason why all of this is a risk, why is it a risk that China pushing narratives on an app can be an issue for the United States? Well, the United States has really struggled on social media to combat misinformation and disinformation. I think we all know examples of posts that we've passed through, probably even today, seeing posts that were either mistaken or outright just disinformation. You know, part of this issue is due to the mass of user-generated content across all platforms, but this is certainly on TikTok, and the burden is on the creator to be truthful in what they are saying. For instance, right now, the burden is on me right now to tell you what is truthful and to not spread misinformation or disinformation. I may not bat 1,000, but I'm certainly going to correct myself where I need to be corrected down in the video comments or wherever I can do that, wherever it's in my ability to correct myself. Not everybody will do that, and especially some people will input their own bias as fact, and that is, that further spreads misinformation and disinformation. Where this becomes a challenge is whenever that misinformation or disinformation either aligns with Chinese interests or is spurred on by, soft information campaigns that are put online. That can be a real challenge because the velocity of user-generated content spreading a particular narrative, that is just incredibly hard to stop because it's not a single source. It is multiple sources coming from multiple different directions, reporting multiple different things. Part of this issue is also due to the algorithm, and this is more specific to TikTok, although this algorithm issue isn't necessarily specific to TikTok, if that makes sense. For TikTok, the issue is that the Chinese government, or at least ByteDance, can alter parts of the algorithm or more favorably spread certain posts to spread a narrative or to spread, some kind of information. But what's really true about any platform is that the algorithm is going to follow what users themselves want to see. And this is where TikTok is incredibly adept. Their platform is probably one of the best, online in getting users the kinds of content that they want to see. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, they all follow the same kind of methodology. Their algorithm is really just trying to present the user or the viewer what they want to see. So it's not, some kind of, magical machine that just produces, hey, here's a video, watch this. We think that based on what you have previously consumed, this is what you might like next. Users tend to react more to sensational news or things that trigger their emotions, right? We've seen this in mainstream media a lot, right? Many of those posts that either stretch the truth or try to sensationalize the truth, they tend to stretch the truth and they tend to input their own biases just to make somebody, want to click. Oh, why is this person saying that? And this is something, frankly, I try to take advantage of with my title thumbnails. Again, there's some hypocrisy kind of being stated here, but I'm going to be honest with you. That's how the YouTube game kind of has to be played. But I'm hoping that in the video part, I can kind of better spread out and explain the nuance of a situation. So it's we're being real and honest here. But again, and I've watched some of these videos on YouTube, and that's part of why I'm so passionate about making these videos on YouTube. Not everybody does that. Some people, they'll post whatever they want. They will spread misinformation or their own bias as truth, and that triggers responses. People will, they will engage in that, and the algorithm sees that, and then the post snowballs. It sees that people are watching this video because they were triggered to watch it, and now they are reacting to this video. Therefore, maybe it is a good video, and it spreads that video to a larger and larger audience. So there is an incentive on creators to do those kinds of tricks to grow their channel, grow their audience, or get a lot of views or whatever it is that they're trying to do. And again, this isn't unique to social media platforms. It's certainly not unique to TikTok. We've seen it with mainstream media. We've seen it with other kinds of shows and entities. This isn't a new trend or a tactic. It's just something that it happens on social media, and it happens on TikTok. Of course, there is the concern that China could weaponize this kind of trend to spread misinformation or disinformation to a broad user base, especially one based in the United States. What the bill that just passed Congress is designed to do is it's designed to force the owner company ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American company. And if that does not happen, then TikTok will be banned from app stores and it will not be allowed to be downloaded onto new devices or devices that don't have TikTok. It will not delete TikTok from your device if you already have it. That's just what I understand. It won't prevent you from logging in or consuming more content. it just will prevent new people from gaining access to TikTok, again, if ByteDance does not sell it to an American company. They'll have about, I believe it was like 6 months for them to find an American buyer and to sell it. This is actually not unprecedented. We've seen the app Grindr went through a similar kind of situation. I believe that was a couple years ago, where Grindr had been purchased by a Chinese company, and Congress forced the sale of Grindr to an American company because it was concerned of Chinese access on data on American government officials, government employees, and military members. It's also not unprecedented for a country to outright ban an app. I mean, talking about banning apps, China's banned a lot of apps. I lived in China for a time. I couldn't access things like YouTube or Google or Facebook. You know, there were ways to access it, but not necessarily state sanctioned. The country of India actually banned TikTok already because other countries are seeing that TikTok can pose these kinds of threats, and India was incredibly quick to target TikTok and to get rid of it. Now, the concern with this bill and with the situation with Grindr is that this sets the precedent for the government to ban certain apps, and that could be an infringement on the First Amendment. And obviously, very, very sensitive issue here in the United States, something that we are very proud of. But it is something that can kind of pose some challenges. Like in this space, when we're talking about misinformation and disinformation, these are people that are legally allowed to say whatever they want, and that's fine. But these kinds of things can have consequences. Those that are opposed to this ban, or to this bill at least, have so far at least stated that Americans should have the right to self-regulate the apps that they possess and the media that they consume. There is, now on the flip, and I'm with that, but at the same time, we need to kind of talk about the flip side of that argument, because there is an issue where Americans either don't know how to self-regulate or they choose not to self-regulate. And then misinformation or disinformation continues to spread and can cause some issues. Of course, we're coming up on a very critical election season. We have a growing list of domestic and international issues. There is going to be a lot of misinformation and disinformation as it is, but do we need TikTok as another vector for that misinformation and disinformation to spread from? And really, should the government be the entity that is regulating this for Americans? And will the government in the future decide to use this ban as an example to ban other less controversial apps on national security grounds? These are some of the questions that are being asked about this bill, and this is really why the Senate might actually be a much more difficult area for this bill to try to pass, because on the House you had so much momentum to ban TikTok, but because of the sheer broad scope of the bill right now and the potential impacts that this bill could set for future legislation, I mean, there are a lot of concerns on what the implications could be and how this could be used in the future. Talking about self-regulation and kind of policing the content that you consume, from what I've seen, younger people don't really seem to even really care about the threats of TikTok. So the House voted, and basically a landslide for this bill, and now it goes to the Senate. It's going to be a bit more challenging. Those are at least the issues on national security grounds that this bill has for TikTok and the threat that TikTok can pose on national security. So I want to hear your thoughts on this because, listen, there's a lot of nuance with this topic. I may not have even caught all of this nuance. I know that I mentioned up front my biases for this. I want to hear what your thoughts are, because this is a conversation that's probably going to be going on for a long time. So let me know your thoughts down below. Subscribe to this channel if you do like conversations like this on national security or conflict. That's all that this channel is. So if you want nerdy conversations about that kind of stuff, this is the place for you. And of course, like this video. It really helps this video reach new audiences. And with all that, I'll see y'all later. Bye.